Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee, for your stamina. I've been here a long time. I'm Ryan. I'm here to speak in favor of House Bill 5343. I'm not here to try to change your mind about the issue of abortion itself. I believe with high confidence that everyone in this room has spent many hours debating personally how they feel morally about abortion itself, about access to that procedure, and so on and so forth. What I'm here for today is to take the current access that a Rhode Island resident has to abortion and to try to codify that in law. And even though I would love to expand access to abortion and repeal certain things, that's not what I'm here about today. I'm here about taking what we currently have and setting it down in writing. And I think this is important because Rhode Island has itself a really complicated history with abortion law. I know one of the concerns about this bill, or the reason that people are going to bring it forward, is a lot of talk about Roe v. Wade. A lot of talk about at the federal level, maybe Roe v. Wade is under some kind of attack. Set that aside. Let's assume Roe v. Wade is totally fine, not paying any attention to that. Rhode Island itself has a history of attacking access to abortion. And I'm young enough that I wasn't around for this, but in the immediate aftermath of Roe v. Wade, Rhode Island was actually the state that tried to dismantle Roe v. Wade the hardest. Roe v. Wade happened in January of 1973. In March of 1973, this state house passed a bill signed by the governor and went into law that tried to define personhood as starting at conception. And for that immediately outlawed abortion effectively in Rhode Island, even though Roe v. Wade was actually still a ruling on the books. It wasn't until 3 months later in June of 1973 that the First Circuit Court of Appeals struck that law down as unconstitutional. And in fact, the text of that law is one of the things that we were talking about cleaning up in our state laws. It's still in there. It's 11-3. It was held that the legislature did not have the right or the power to define when personhood began at the point of conception. So that was 1973. Rhode Island was kind of, I guess, the Texas or whatever of that era in terms of trying to fight this very hard. And it makes sense because we're a very Catholic state traditionally, and that's kind of our identity and where we come from. In addition to that, someone brought up earlier the fact that our state constitution has an explicit mention of abortion. And it mentions that the rights granted in Article 1, which include things like the right to religious freedom, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Nothing in that section construes any rights to abortion or the funding of abortion thereof. That language was added in 1986. It was added 13 years after Roe v. Wade in a constitutional convention here in Rhode Island. We put that question on the ballot. The ballot question literally did not mention the word abortion. It mentioned various other, freedom of speech, things like that. Like, do you want to support this change to the Constitution? No mention of reproductive rights, no mention of abortion. It passed the vote and was added to our Constitution. It's on the first page. It comes before we mention religious freedom, which our state was founded upon. It comes before we mention the prohibition of slavery. It's this line just like, it's just there. You're reading what seems like, some restatement of our general principles. And we took the time in the 80s to make it very clear that this was not something that we supported. So just looking, it's been a while since 1973, it's been a while since 1986. I do think that Rhode Island public opinion on this has shifted over time. And I think, as someone else cited earlier, there's a Pew study from January of this year that says Rhode Islanders support the continued right to access to abortion by a 2-to-1 margin. Yes. But Rhode Island was not always that way. And again, at points in the past, this state house, and our state specifically, has tried attacking this right. Not some judge that is going to a point or anything like that. It's something that we as a state have had to come around to. And so, for me personally, it would mean a lot for Rhode Island to actually be willing to stand up and state this is the thing that we believe in and we support. Because to the best of my knowledge, and I read through the entirety of the Rhode Island state laws, there's nowhere that we say that. There's nowhere that we have ever said that as a state. I'm not from Rhode Island originally. I came here after I graduated from college because I wanted to start a business. And for me, Rhode Island was the right place to do that. And I have been here for the better part of a decade now, and I am immensely proud of this state and immensely proud to be a Rhode Islander. But I am not proud of this. I'm not proud of this at all. This is not the Rhode Island that I want to be a part of, that I want to continue to build. I want to see a Rhode Island that moves to support the things that it's implicitly letting people do right now, but it's never been willing to take a stand and take a vote and say, yep, this is what we believe in, and we want this to remain this way because we believe in it as a state, not because the federal government said this is how it should be. One final point that I want to make, one of the themes of tonight, I think, has been thinking about regret, and thinking about how to measure it. Certainly people telling very personal stories about it. I want to say, particularly to the people who told the stories, that I believe you. I think that regret is incredibly real, and I'm so sorry for the weight that you were forced to carry about that decision. I think that in a lot of ways, the flip side of choice is regret. When you have the ability to choose and when you have to make a difficult choice, one of the great tragedies of life is that you can come back and regret it later. And I think what's really important about making that choice is the fact that you are the one who makes the choice. No law is ever going to protect us from regret. There are always going to be situations where we, as individuals, try to do the best that we can to make the wrong decision. But I think what I want from my state, and what I so pray that my state can do, is to say, this is one of the choices you are allowed to make. You're not always going to get it right, no matter what world we live in. But the ability to make that choice, and the ability to have that free will and control your own destiny, is one of the most important things I can think of. And I say that as someone who, for abortion specifically, will never have to make that specific choice. I know that makes it complicated in a whole variety of other ways. But I know so many other people for whom just that opportunity and the ability to make that decision for themselves is a pivotal moment in life. So that's about all I have to say.